The joy of Christmas surprises. Track trouble. My brother came home from college with a grin and a stack of ideas. He had been studying engineering, and by the second evening, he had a pencil behind his ear and a ruler in his pocket, telling us how this Christmas we would have a proper rail service. Not just a little circular train track under the tree. A real line, he said, with a station in the kitchen for snacks and a timetable everyone could rely on. It sounded grand, just as his plans always did. Mom looked doubtful, Grandma looked amused, and my younger cousins clapped excitedly. He dragged out the old model train from the hall closet, checked the wheels, and set the first pieces of the track around the tree. Then he kept going. Across the rug, under the coffee table, along the baseboard, through the hallway, and into the kitchen. Halfway to his first station, he ran out of track. "Simple problem," he said. "Simple fix." After he put on his coat, he set off down the street to beg every boy in the neighborhood for spare pieces. At the first house he stopped at, a dog burst through the door and snatched one of the tracks right out of his hand. The whole family laughed from the porch as my brother gave chase. He slid on the ice, arms windmilling, and went down hard while the dog raced triumphant laps around the yard. He finally recovered the track after he remembered the pepperoni he had brought with him for a snack and traded it for the track with the dog. The next house brought the toughest bargain. A neighbor boy agreed to hand over 3 good pieces of track, but only if my brother promised he could drive the train once it was running. My brother tried to argue about the improper safety and lack of training, but the boy wouldn't budge. He signed the deal with a solemn handshake, then pieces of track in one hand and pride swallowed in the other. By evening, my brother returned with a paper bag full of mismatched track pieces, scuffed and bent from years of play. Some pieces were wider, and a few didn't quite match at all. He didn't seem to care, though, and started to build it with fervor. He made bridges out of encyclopedias, a ramp out of a wooden ruler, and a gentle curve with the help of a cookie tin. When the curve refused to hold, he wedged it with a folded dish towel and nodded as if the dish towel had always been part of the blueprints. He even drew a timetable on a card and taped it to the mantel. First departure, living room to kitchen. 5 past the hour. Return with cookies 5 minutes later. The first test run barely made it past the hearth before the cat struck. The cat crouched, eyes gleaming, and leapt. The caboose went flying. The engine tipped, and ornaments rattled on the tree. The cat strutted off, and my brother murmured something about unauthorized wildlife on the tracks. He rebuilt, adding a book as a shield, and tried again. The train bumped and rattled into the hallway and towards the kitchen. That was where his big experiment waited. An overpass made from a tin tray balanced on encyclopedias. Mom had set a plate of cookies on top, ready for loading. The train climbed bravely onto the tray, and for 2 seconds, it looked steady. On the 3rd second, the book shifted, and the tray slipped, and down went the bridge. The train toppled into the gap, the cookies skidded across the linoleum, and Grandma's wooden spoon clattered to the floor. Everyone froze for half a beat. Then the room erupted into laughter. Mom shook her head, scooped up the cookies, and said, "At least they're clean enough to save." My brother stood over the wreckage, frowning like an engineer at a failed test. "Needs stronger ties," he announced. He went looking for tape, found the roll empty, then tried string and came up short. Finally, desperate, he borrowed one of Dad's old ties, the blue one with faint stripes that Dad hadn't worn in years. He lashed the tray down like he was securing valuable cargo for the railroad. Dad wandered in, spotted the missing tie, and raised an eyebrow. "That's company property, son," he said. My brother called it repurposed infrastructure. Dad chuckled and let him be. The second run was better. The train rattled across the tied-down bridge, collected its cookies, and limped back into the living room. The cookies arrived cracked but intact, and everyone cheered. Before long, the family got creative. Someone suggested coca. That ended with a long brown streak on the hallway rug and my brother scrubbing with a towel while everyone else howled with laughter. My cousins tried candy canes, which bounced out one by one, leaving a sweet trail behind. Neighbors stopped in, curious about the train route. They crowded the doorway, pointing out which tracks were theirs. The boy with the bragging rights reminded everyone he still had a turn to drive, and my brother surrendered the controller. We watched in delight as the train lurched and sputtered under rookie hands. For 3 days the Christmas train ran, patched together with books, towels, and one very knotted tie. Every run brought spills, crashes, and cheers. The clatter of wheels filled the house more than the radio or the clink of dishes. On the 4th day, the bridge gave way one last time. The books collapsed, and my brother stood back with his hands on his hips. "Temporarily closed for scheduled maintenance," he announced. The train never ran again after that, but years later, whenever my brother started explaining one of his big college ideas, someone in the family would lean in and ask, "Does it involve a tin tray and one of Dad's ties?" And we would all burst out laughing again. Merry Christmas from the Paawz house. See you tomorrow.